Hello, BookTube. I was ready to say in this video that it's a bleak and barren Monday because it's Martin Luther King Day here in America and there's no mail. But it turns out there is deliveries by other carriers. UPS delivered a book this morning. It just isn't one that I can bother talking about. And I only got one. So it wasn't really enough for a mail haul, and I don't think I'm going to get anything else today, but I do have a tag. I was planning on a tag being the only thing I had today. But I got a little mail, but not much mail. Anticlimactic mail. So I thought I would do this tag instead, which I saw on Richardson Reads. It's the Pixar tag. And he saw it first on Todd the Librarian's channel, but I think it was made by This Is Me. And Todd the Librarian didn't tag Mark at Richardson Reads. Mark just liked the look of it, so he thought he'd do it himself. And then when Mark was done, he passed on that legacy of hate by not tagging me. But I also liked the look of the tag, so I thought I would do it as well. And it's just a few questions. I thought it might be interesting, some of the answers. The first one, it's all about Pixar movies, although Up, for some reason, is not listed in the tag. Maybe there's a second one. But the first one is Cars. Name a book in which characters go on a long physical journey. And the first thing that came to my mind, because it's been on my mind lately, is going to be a book that Mark himself held up on his video for a different answer. It's Star Trek. The Voyages of the Starship Enterprise. These are the voyages of the Starship Enterprise. That historic 5-year mission that later Star Trek fiction tells us the Enterprise was an extremely rare example of a ship that makes it back relatively intact with captain and most of its crew, which is fun. That's fun to think about. Then we have, let's see here, what's this next one? Inside Out. Name a book about the mind. And mine is a little bit of a strange suggestion, but it was one of the first things that came to my mind, and it wasn't psychology. It was long before there was psychology. It was long before anyone knew what the mind was. It's the Meditations and Prayers of St. Anselm, which you can get in a Penguin Classic with a really good introduction, really good notes. And you might think, well, no, that's not the mind. That's the heart or the soul. That's devotionals. But now St. Anselm was trying to understand the mind. When you read these things, especially if you read them now in the 21st century, you'll see that that's what he's groping for. That's what a lot of the really smart early expounders of Christianity, that's what they were going for. That's what St. Augustine goes for quite a bit. But Anselm's especially, it might not be an entirely healthy psychology that's on display in his book, but it's definitely psychology and not devotion. I think it's fascinating, absolutely fascinating, and maybe worth your time. If it interests you, you might want to read him instead of writing him off. A lot of people don't read him anymore. He wrote a huge amount. So let's see here. What's the next one? Monsters, Inc. Who or what is your most lovable book creature? And again, in his version of the tag, Mark listed Tribbles from David Gerald's short story, The Trouble with Tribbles, his Star Trek episode for the original show, The Trouble with Tribbles, in which the Enterprise and crew meet a thing called a Tribble, which is a little furball that has no teeth, no aggressive instincts whatsoever, seems to be the quintessential, completely harmless creature, except they hate Klingons, and Klingons hate them. And that's a great choice, but I thought I'd pick another one, but not stray far from Star Trek, by picking the Horta from the original series episode, The Devil in the Dark, written by Gene L. Coon, a great old science fiction hack. And it's the story of a very distant and remote and sparsely populated mining colony that is experiencing monster attacks. And when our crew, when Kirk and Spock and McCoy finally encounter the monster, the Horta, a very different story unfolds. Those of you who haven't seen the episode really should. It's really good. Like most of the original Star Trek episodes, it holds up magnificently well. So that when you watch it, unlike watching, for instance, almost any episode of Star Trek The Next Generation, when you watch it, you're not thinking, Oh, remember when I thought this was really smart? Oh. Well, okay, but for nostalgia reasons, I still like watching it. That you think that when you watch Star Trek: The Next Generation and you see these adults in pajamas and talking endlessly, talking all the time on what's supposed to be a science fiction adventure show. But when you rewatch Star Trek, the original Star Trek, which I think is all on Netflix, with those great remastered special effects, God, it's amazing. You don't feel that way. When you rewatch the probably 30 great Star Trek episodes, your feeling is just that you're pulled into the melodrama of it. You're pulled into the characters and the dialogue and the great pacing, the great old school television pacing. So if you haven't seen The Devil in the Dark, I highly advise it. It would be on my, if I had to make a list, I've done it many times before, a list of 20 Star Trek episodes that you really should watch. That would be one of them, along with The Ultimate Computer and the Corbomite Maneuver and The Balance of Terror, and of course my favorite, Who Mourns for Adonis, in which the Enterprise crew meets Apollo, the god Apollo, and Amok Time, and of course the greatest Star Trek episode of them all, City on the Edge of Forever. But The Devil in the Dark would be on that list. So I'm going to say the Horta for my favorite creature, and we'll move on. What's the next one here? Finding Nemo. Who's the best book dad? And I'm going to pick Sam Pollitt from The Man Who Loved Children. Not because he's the best in a good sense, but because he's the best to read about. He's actually a nightmare of a father, but he's the most fun to read about. Just page after page after page of I don't really know what you'd call The Man Who Loved Children. Maybe, I mean, comedy, yes, but comedy seems to sell it short for me. Maybe high comedy, if there is such a thing. I don't really know what you'd call it. A very, almost overwhelmingly powerful, prolonged episode in Mandarin comedy that I love it. And look at this paperback edition. Isn't that lovely? So I picked Sam Pollitt for that, even though he's not Father of the Year. And then also Brave, which is Who's the Best Book Mother. And for that, I'm going to mention someone I've mentioned before, Raksha, the wolf, the she-wolf from the Seoni wolf pack, who takes in the little boy Mowgli, the little human boy, who finds his way to her den as a little baby, who's being hunted by Shere Khan the tiger, who's killed Mowgli's parents and or driven them off and terrorized his village, and wants the baby for his own to eat. And there's a great scene in the first Mowgli story in the Jungle Books where he shoves his enormous head inside the wolf den to demand the baby. And Raksha, whose name when she was younger and in fighting trim in the pack was Raksha the Demon, stands her ground against Shere Khan, whose head is as big as her whole body, and insists that he back off. the little man cub is hers, and she'll defend him. And he won't try it. In the security of her own den against a ferocious mother wolf, he won't try it. It's not only our first introduction to Shere Khan, but it's also our first indication that he is at heart a coward. And that it's a wonderful moment. It makes me, and I'm sure it made a whole bunch of other Edwardian children fall in love with Raksha. So she would be my bet for best mom. Then the next one is Toy Story, a book from your childhood that every child should read. You know, the book from my childhood that I really liked, gathering a bunch of beagles and hunting a fat bookworm through the woods and bluffs of eastern Iowa. Did you ever read that one? No books from my childhood. I would strongly urge kids just to read, find your own niche, find what you really like, and then pursue it. Because that's what healthy reading is. That's what healthy reading is. You find your own kind of thing, a kind of thing that you like to read, and then just read more of it. That will build your muscles, that will feed your hunger and keep you hungry, and with any luck, that will deliver you to adulthood as just the right kind of reader. The kind of reader who isn't stuck just reading that one kind of thing, but has now become strong enough and firm enough on that foundation so that you then range everywhere, absolutely everywhere. It's what I always say, a little bit begrudgingly. That's what Harry Potter the Harry Potter books did for the people who encountered them, all of you, who encountered them as kids. And all of a sudden, not just your world, but the nightly news and the adults around you and the bookstores were revolving around these books. And you could read them and take them to heart and reread them and memorize them. And almost universally, when it comes to Harry Potter kids, I have found that it had the best possible effect later on in their lives, in that it made them real readers. It didn't just make them Harry Potter readers. It made them book readers. And they got that way because of the pattern that I'm describing, because they grabbed onto the best kind of book, the thing they liked the most, and it gave them the foundation, the courage, the confidence to then move on to everywhere else. And that's, I of course think that the books are sheep dip. they're just poop. But I can't thank J.K. Rowling enough for almost single-handedly creating an entire generation of readers. I would condemn her if those readers were, for instance, the reading world equivalent of whiny millennials, but they're not. I've met 100 of these Harry Potter kids, and they're fantastic readers, almost without exception. I credit that to her, and hats off to her. Good for her to do that. So anyway, I'm sorry. There are no books that I was hunting bookworms. I wasn't joining them. Let's see here. The Incredibles. If you could have one superpower, what would it be? I don't know. Talking to dogs? Oh, that's outlandish. No one could possibly have that. No sense of pain? What kind of human being could live under those conditions? What about the ability to digest and draw nutrients from virtually anything? From dried leaves to rat poison to rotting food. Come on, be realistic. No one could be like that. So if I had to pick one that isn't so outlandish, I would say teleportation. I think that would be my choice for a superpower that if I could have one, would be that I can teleport anywhere if I know the place. It doesn't make any sense. I never understand in movies or in comic books when someone has the ability to teleport anywhere. How can you teleport somewhere if you don't know it? You have to know where it is. You have to know where you're going. But if you do, so it'd be local. It'd be a very local thing. I would like. I can't stand the intermediary stages of getting from point A to point B. I can't stand that. I've always hated it. And I hate it even more now that my sphere has narrowed so much. I used to hate it when I traveled. There's nothing worse when you're traveling if you know that old saying that the journey is the destination. That sometimes isn't true. Sometimes when you're traveling across tundra or desert and you have an end destination in mind and it's 3 days away and you're traveling by horse or by camel, sometimes the journey isn't the destination. You just want the journey to be over with. Or the modern equivalent, which I went through before I gave up air flight, which is that you have a huge rigmarole to go through. You're leaving such and such a small town at dawn. You're getting on a little plane. You're lucky if it makes it to its destination. Then you've got a bigger plane to find in a big airport. You might miss it. You take that plane, it's a long flight, you've got nothing to do and recycled air to do it on, then you land and you're in another rabbit warren of a place, miles and miles and miles of corridors, and maybe that plane was late, maybe the connection is late, maybe you've got to run those miles or miss your other plane and maybe spend the night in that airport, and so on and so forth. So the whole thing is just tedium. There's no way to enjoy it. You have to just sort of suspend your identity and wait until it's all over. And now that I don't travel, I experience a smaller version of that here in Boston. Now, not lately, not since September. I have had a puppy this whole time, and she doesn't really admit of travel. I'm not going to go out on long self-indulgent errands if somebody is back here crying every minute because I'm not with her. When she's a little older, she's already starting to get there. When she's a little older, she won't go ballistic when I'm not around. She'll just settle down and relax. She'll just go to sleep or look out the window. And that's fine. That I can live with. I don't still picture myself being away from her all that much. There really isn't any reason. I can take her on huge walks. I can take her to the post office up the street, or the used bookstores up the street. I just did that, and it worked. I can take her to the grocery store that's across 2 highways from me and down a hill a little, because they're perfectly welcome dogs. I can take her everywhere I need to go. So the alternative would be just the things I can't take her, don't want to take her on, are long subway rides to various outlying places to gather used books that I need like an extra hole in the head. So that has tended to fall away. But even when some of that resumes, and it will, I'm sure it will in 2018, I would still like it if I had the superpower to just be where I am, where I want to go, instead of the tedium of getting there. The closest that I've been able to come, since that doesn't exist, and as far as I can tell, according to physics, if I could dematerialize and rematerialize somewhere else, it wouldn't be me anymore. It would be an exact copy of me. That's the problem I always had with the Federation transporters in Star Trek, since this tag can't seem to get away from Star Trek. But the closest I can come to that in the real world is the miracle of paid car services, which I discovered only a couple of years ago. I don't know how I lived without them. I guess they didn't exist. That's how I lived without them. They are so much better than taxi cabs. Oh my God. So much better. And 10 times more convenient. You don't need to worry about how much cash you have on you, and they come to your house, and they drop you off at your house, and they exist for you. Their orientation is for the customer, rather than I've got a medallion to pay for. And it really shows. So I installed a Lyft app on my phone, and that is the closest that I come. So I don't get to immediately transport myself to where I want to go, but I do get to go there for the cost of the duration of a pleasant conversation, which I can live with. But that would be my choice, would be teleportation. And then let's see here. What is the next one? Ratatouille. Name a fictional food that you would eat. I think I mentioned this before on this channel. Lembas, the whey bread of the elves from The Lord of the Rings, where we're told that they're little wafers, but they're immensely filling and immensely energizing. We're not told that they taste all that good, but that's the dream for me for food. Because with food, again, I would like to teleport to the end of the process. With food, it's the buying, the fixing, the cleaning, the preparation, the disposing of. I would like to have just a box of Lembas, because I don't care about eating at all. I would like it just to, if I could eat something that would keep me going just fine, and not even think about it, I would. I would like to reduce it to less than a footnote. And I can't do that. Instead, you've got to constantly be thinking, is this food fresh? Do you need to clean this? How much time do you need to prepare this? How much time do you need to get it ready? Is it going to be enough? Is it going to be too much? A nice box of Lembas every month would be great. And then the last question is Coco, which I haven't seen yet. A book with an international setting. I wanted to point out to, I guess it's This Is Me was the originator of the tag. Probably This Is Me already knows this, which is that all books have international settings. Saying international settings is, I want to check your privilege, Americans. All books have international settings, but the one that I have in mind, because I had to pick one, is from an author that I don't think gets the credit that he does. I never hear him mentioned on BookTube. I scarcely ever hear him mentioned anywhere else, and that's James Michener. And specifically his book Caribbean, although I could have picked Poland. Or even space. I could have picked his great book on man's journey into space. But Caribbean, I really love. Michener had a shtick. He had a pattern that he would do. Researchers would do a huge amount of research. Then he would figure out what are the narrative arcs here, and he would have a few of them. So a lot of his big panoramic novels don't really have what you'd call a plot. The place is the plot. And I love them. I just think they're so good. They were a production number. They don't read at all the same as the actual novels of his. Those are really good too, but they read completely different. But his big gigantic panorama novels, I just love. I don't know anybody else that in the 70s they were big, and I don't know anybody else that did them anywhere near as good. So for a book with an international setting, I'm going to pick Caribbean. Although, there are a lot of other Michener books that I could pick, but I'll stick with that one. And And that's it. That is the Pixar tag for Martin Luther King Day, in which I'm only getting one package on no U.S. mail. And I'm going to continue Richardson Reads' legacy of hate by not tagging anyone. So if you want to do this, and you see this on this video, you're going to have to just sort of horn your way in, feeling abused and neglected. So happy holidays. Thank you, BookTube.